Welcome back for a brand new 10 list. This is not going to be specifically a top 10. This is instead going to be strictly looking at 10, and this is going to be an ongoing off-again special 10 series, where I look at price tracking involving video games. Now, in this first edition, I am looking at strictly, really specifically 10, and with that said, there is no honorable mentions in this list since it's not an actual top 10. But we will look at 10 specific consoles. Now, this will include both handheld as well as home console. And we will be looking specifically at the base price point for January of 2021, and then the base price point for 2022, or rather January of 2022, a 1 year apart, and also looking and then at the end mentioning how much a brand new version of that console will cost. So since there's many platforms in the future, I'll do another one of these. In this edition, I chose just probably one specific console that is relatively less well known. Most of these platforms are all very well known, so there's a few consoles you wonder why I didn't mention. It's because I'll probably mention them in a future one, as well as this one's going to be more looking at stuff from like the 4th and 5th generation, predominantly with a few from the 6th. So next time, expect for maybe some mentions of stuff from the 1st to 3rd generations, as well as a few less well-known platforms, as well as more handhelds next time. But with that said, and like I said, this is not a ranking of a top 10. So, with that said, the first of these 10 specific platforms looking at, first let's go back to the 16-bit war era of the 4th console generation. And the first one of the 6 platforms, or 10 platforms, looking at, and yes, also I'll mention my predictions and forecasts of the near future, looking at overall statistics over a period of like 5 years and stuff, if I think it's going to stay relatively steady, go up, or go down. But the first one looking at is the Super Nintendo, or the SNES, or SNES. However you want to say it. First up, looking at the base price point, keep in mind this is loose. This is not complete in box, but I am mentioning, of course, new. But the base price point of a loose console, still with everything included, January of 2021, the console is going for, on average, according to price charting, $68. Not too bad overall, and keep in mind, this is just the Model 1. There was a Model 2, though it did not sell that huge. Then we look to January of 2022. So, last month. And it was on average teetering around $60 even. So technically down about $8 from the year prior. As for me, also quickly mention a brand new factory sealed copy of a Super Nintendo complete, everything included. It will run you around $585 as of right now. Now, with that said, what are my predictions for at least the near future? For the Super Nintendo, I personally think that it's probably going to stay relatively steady. I mean, given from 1 year prior to this year, the amount difference is about $8, so I don't think there's going to be a huge difference. Now, during the holiday season, there was a spike in price. It was hovering around like the $80 range, but after the holidays stopped, it basically dropped to about $20. So, with that said, yeah, for now, I think the Super Nintendo is going to stay relatively steady. Overall, it may increase a little bit over time, inklings here and there, but given collection-wise, yeah, there's still people collecting from like the Super Nintendo, Sega Dreamcast, mostly though just the software, the cartridges themselves, not the actual console hardware. Plus, with things like the Retron 5 and things like that, nowadays a lot less people are interested in buying the original unless they grew up with it, actually, like myself. But with that said, let's look at the next one, also the major competitor. Now, machine hardware price range, I mean, Super Nintendo price range right now is actually still relatively affordable. It's not insanely overpriced, in my opinion, compared to some other stuff out there. But the next one is the Sega Genesis, and specifically looking at the Model 2, because that is probably the most iconic. Some people say the Model 1, but to me, the Model 2 is the most iconic. It was the best selling of the three different models. And we don't really speak of Model 3 at all because basically it's garbage. And the fact you cannot use the 32X or the CD add-ons either on the Model 3. So with that said, with the Sega Genesis Model 2 now January of 2021, the average going price for the Sega Genesis was about $32, which is very affordable. We're talking half the price of the Super Nintendo at the same time period. Then looking at January of this year, it actually has gone up, not a huge amount. As of January last month, the average price for a Model 2 was going for around $41. So it went up about $9 from the year prior, but even so, $41 is still very affordable. The Genesis by far is still a very cheap console overall, I think, to collect. Definitely. The Model 2, to keep in mind, or Model 1, is a bit more expensive. The Model 1 on average price seems to be ranging anywhere from like $60 $70 range. So it's going for about 50% more on average than the Model 2. But that's because the Model 2 is a little bit easier to find and there's more copies out there still working. So that's why the prices are more affordable. Now also, if you're wanting a brand new Sega Genesis complete in box factory sealed, believe it or not, it's on average going for about $134. So it is by far, out of all the ones I'm going to mention on this video, it's by far the cheapest to buy brand new. And in my opinion, at that price for a brand new factory sealed Genesis, I think that's honestly more than worth the asking price personally. If I could come across like a Genesis complete in box brand new still, I'd probably honestly pay that. If I had the money, that is. But with that said, where do I see the Genesis going right now? I think it's going to stay, like the Super Nintendo, I think it's going to stay relatively steady. There's not a huge demand for the Genesis, except for those of us who are hardcore loyalist Sega fans, like myself, which my first console was a Genesis, so keep that in mind. With that said, I think really a lot of the 16-bit era, except for a few selective iconic franchise games and stuff, I think the fourth console generation is now mostly down to just hardcore collectors. I think a lot of the mainstream collectors and stuff have started moving on to, I think right now specifically the sixth console generation, I think is the big one, though I still see stuff going up probably a bit more still on the fifth generation. But in my opinion, the sixth generation is the big one right now that's really going up. With that said, speaking of, let's go on to the fifth console generation with the next platform. Looking at the Nintendo 64. Now, with this one, base on average price for a loose console, January of 2021, on average, the N64 was going for about $30. And as of January this year, believe it or not, it was going for about $57. So it has nearly doubled in the past year for the N64. And that honestly kind of flew me for a real surprise. I was genuinely not expecting that. But I think right now, looking at some trends and stuff with the N64, I think there's relatively new interest in the console thanks to things like the HD collection introducing a new generation, I think, of gamers to like specifically Mario 64 as well as like specific other N64 probably iconic games like obviously Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, 007 GoldenEye, and a few other very iconic games like that. For the most part, though, I actually think it's going to go relatively steady moving forward right now. I mean, it could go up more, but I think after a big jump, and looking at past times it had jumped over a period of time, it would go back down, usually about 50% down. So I think later this year, like spring into summer, I think the N64 could drop below $50 into the 40 some range. I'm not 100% certain, but looking at overall statistics over a period of like 5 or 6 years for it, that's what I see happening with the N64. But yeah, I think overall it's going to stay relatively steady, though there's definitely been quite a big increase. I mean, of almost double. But with that said, yeah, could see over the next few months maybe going down a little, losing some of the average price it's going for. Now, if you're wanting one of these curious price range for a brand new factory sealed, you're looking at around the average range of about $293. So yeah, it's going for a pretty penny. And even though it's like doubled, I'd say wait if you're curious about getting a console, wait to see if it drops. If it drops to around the 40 some range, I would definitely recommend picking up an N64 if you can get one. Keep in mind, this is the base normal gray one. If you're wanting like one of the like special like color see-through ones, you're probably going to be paying over $100 for one of those. So good luck if you want one of those. Next up, we're going to look at probably the most niche of the platforms in this video, which is one I'm happy to say I have. But that is the Panasonic 3DO, and we are looking at the Model 1. There was technically 3 models. The Gold Star is probably the cheapest made model, so it's probably overall the cheapest, but we're looking at the actual Panasonic model. So with that said, as of January 2021, the 3DO average price was going for about $142. And as of 2022, January, it was going for on average about $172. So it has gone up about $30 in the past year. How do I see the 3DO moving forward? Honestly, this is one of the few times where I think I actually see the 3DO going up in price. In all honesty, reason, it's a much more niche console, and it's very much a console only for like specific type of collectors that are interested in collecting niche things and are interested in just learning more about the history of the console or specific games they're interested in to play on the console, because 3DO arguably probably has the best original like Street Fighter 2 port, arguably quality-wise, and I would say also probably one of the best home ports of games like, Dragon's Lair, as well as Myst, and as well as Alone in the Dark and many other classics. So that's one of the reasons. Now, if you're wanting one of these factory sealed box, I am genuinely surprised it's not more. A brand new Panasonic 3DO will set you back about $640. Still pretty pricey. But yeah, the 3DO, I definitely do think it's going to be going up more because of its rarity. Because in total, it's sold, I think, close to 3 million copies, and I am genuinely surprised it sold that many. It far outsold most of the others of that time period, with the exception of maybe some like the Turbo Graphics may have actually sold better. I think it may have sold worldwide about 5 million, given it was also known as the PC Engine. But with that said, coming in next, we are looking at actually the only handheld in this edition. And that is, we are looking at the original OG, classic Game Boy, the original gray model. As of January 2021, on average, it was going for $48, which is not too bad, surprisingly. Now, if you are curious, now here's the thing, looking forward to January this past year, it went for right now around $52, so it has gone up $4. So I definitely think it's going to be staying very steady right now, in all honesty. I don't see it drastically increasing because looking over a period of like 10 years for this specific console or handheld, it's been a very gradual, slow climb over a period of time. It's not been drastic like roller coaster like some of these others. It's been a very slow and steady going up. So I definitely think it may go up, but I think it's going to stay relatively steady and continue its gradual climb. However, when it comes to finding one of these brand new factory sealed, the price is insanely expensive. And I mean insane, is by far the most expensive. An OG Game Boy, if you're wanting, given how rare it is and how rarely it sells a new copy, uh, on average you're looking at $5,000. I'm not even joking. 5K. That's insane. But the rarity is also very insane. Next up, we're looking at the original classic PlayStation. Um, Now, looking at January of last year, on average, the PS1 was going for about $40. Now, interestingly enough, looking at January this year, the PS1 is going for $34. So it's actually dropped $6 from last year. So this is one of the few times that it actually has dropped in price, which I find quite fascinating. Now, how do I think it's going to go forward for now? I think the PS1 is going to stay very steady. Now, I have noticed price-wise that the PS1, the Model 2 PlayStation, the PS1 as it was called, the miniature version, it is going for a bit more. On average, it's going for on average like about 60 or so. So, on average, it's probably going for between, I would say, nearly double the price. So yeah, it's actually more high in demand than the original model. So for collectors out there, I would say genuinely, this is a great time to pick up an original PlayStation for your personal collection. If you're interested, I recommend getting it now, given it's right now staying at about like going for like 30 some dollars. This is the perfect time to pick one up. And then just be very cautious and very calculate when it comes to buying the actual software for the console, because that's where the real prices are, is going to be in the games. Keep in mind there are many games on the PS1 you can still get affordable. A lot of great platformers specifically are very affordable. RPGs and survival horror games are the exception to that rule. And fighting games are 50-50 really when it comes down to it price-wise. The Tekken games are relatively affordable, and many other less well-known fighting games like D Strega is very affordable. Then you have games like the Bloody Roar series, which is going up in price, but that's because of its bit more rarity. Then it was a Hudson Soft game. But if you're wanting a PS1, say brand new, you're looking about $280, which is relatively not bad, really, when you think about it. Next up, we're going on to the Sega Dreamcast. Now, of the base price range, right now, the Dreamcast is the second most expensive on here, next to the 3DO. The Saturn, as of January 2021, the average price was going for around $130. And as of January 2022, the Saturn is going for about $152. So it's actually gone up about $22 from year prior over the past year. So where do I see it right now moving forward? Honestly, I see the Saturn still going up in price. I don't see it slowing down anytime soon, even though there's been a few little dips here and there from big jacks in price. Because of a lot of big name YouTubers, specifically fighting game YouTubers, as well as fighting game fanatics in mind, is the reason why I don't see the Saturn dropping in price anytime soon. The fact it was one of the less not so great selling consoles. It sold about 9 million units on average, so not great, and it's more common in Japan than it is in North America. So definitely American, of course, copies of games, very expensive to collect, especially for fighting games. And that's the big reason why I don't see the Saturn price dropping or even staying relatively steady. I think it will still continue to increase, maybe not as super fast paced, but I think it's going to stay relatively steady moving forward for a while to come, especially when you have big name YouTubers like Maximilian Dude, which constantly have done a lot of gameplay stuff with the Saturn. Big names like him is a reason why Saturn goes for a pretty good penny. It's when the bigger influencers on YouTube as well as on Twitch. And thanks to the fact nowadays you can find like HDMI cord plugins and stuff for Saturns and stuff. Through, believe it or not, things like Limited Run Games you can get HDMI, which I've thought about looking into myself. But yeah, if you're curious about getting a Saturn, I don't recommend unless you're a hardcore Sega fan. This is definitely not a console I recommend getting. One, because the price right now is relatively expensive if you ask me, especially when I got mine back several years ago and I got it for like $40. So yeah, I would wait. If you can find one for affordable price range, get it. Otherwise, don't. Because, I mean, if you think the console's bad, look at software prices. It's insane unless you import from Japan. And even then, on some games, it can be relatively expensive. So with that said, also, if you're wanting a new, on average, a Saturn is going for about $670 new. Next up, looking at the Nintendo Gamecube, which is one in recent time has been hefty going up somewhat, especially the software sales. Hardware side of things with the GameCube has not been going for the insane amount of money that the software has been. So keep that in mind. So, with the GameCube, January 2021, GameCube was going for on average trending for $65 overall. As of 2022, it averaged trending for $56. So it's actually dropped $9 since last year. Where do I see it moving forward? Honestly, right now, I think the GameCube is going to stay relatively steady for now. I don't see a massive increase unless there's more big announcements of maybe remasters or remakes coming down the pipeline that could affect games for the GameCube. Other than that, I don't really see any huge spikes right now anytime soon for the GameCube, in my opinion. So yeah, I think it's going to stay steady. If you're looking for a new one, on average, the GameCube brand new trends for about $500. So no, it is expensive. Like I said, the real money though for GameCube is going to be in the actual video games themselves. Especially the Nintendo exclusive games like Super Mario Sunshine or Eternal Darkness. Games like that. You need to keep these things in mind, especially the two Pokemon games. They're very pricey. But with that said, overall, yeah, this actually is probably a good time to pick up an actual GameCube console itself. Now, keep in mind this price range is based on the Indigo color console, since that is the most common GameCube color out there. Now, second to last, we're looking at, of course, my personal favorite, the Sega Dreamcast. Now, I'm genuinely surprised the Dreamcast is actually not as bad in the hardware price as I would have expected versus what the Saturn is. On average, as of January 2021, it was going for on average about $66.50 for a Dreamcast, and as of right now, on average, the Dreamcast is trending for around $74.50, so it's gone up about $8 in the past year. How do I see it moving forward? I see it staying relatively steady. It might go up another possibly 5 to 10% at max. But for now, I don't really see the GameCube going up a drastic amount compared to the Saturn. The Dreamcast, though, it is definitely has been hitting nostalgia, especially when you look at the actual game prices, the actual software prices. That's where the Dreamcast is insanely expensive. So unless you plan on importing a lot of Dreamcast fighting games and stuff like I've done, which would require either to get a Japanese import console or do what I do and try to get a hold of a Codebreaker or Game Shark. That's the only other way to get around the region lock. So keep that in mind. and it can be relatively hard to find code breakers nowadays. So good luck in that. But overall, and if you're curious, brand new, on average, a new Dreamcast will set you back about $680. But yeah, overall, I honestly think keep an eye for a reasonable price. This is actually not a bad time to get a Dreamcast console in price. Keep in mind, that's strictly the hardware, not the software. Very, very insanely overpriced software right now. Unless, again, like me, you're a hardcore Sega fanatic or an uber Capcom fighting game fan, don't get the Dreamcast. That's all I'm saying. Last, we're going to look at what I think is one of the more criminally underrated consoles. Now, I'm surprised it did go up a little, but we're looking at the original classic Xbox, which I still think is a somewhat undervalued console, both because the hardware, the fact it was the very first home console to actually introduce a built-in hard drive, like an actual PC, which is a very fascinating concept and idea at the time. It was revolutionary in that aspect. But if you want to take a gamer tag or gameplay stuff with you to a friend's house, you still have the VMU memory cards you could buy. And for the most part, really good, solid console, well built, and a superb game library, especially if, like me, you're an uber old school Star Wars fan. You have over 20 Star Wars games you can play on the console. So you definitely have variety and great RPGs like Fable, Jade Empire, and many others, as well as some superb fighting games. Games like, of course, Dead or Alive Ultimate, Volume 1 and 2, Dead or Alive 3, or heck, many other games. As well as, heck, you could even play Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and Capcom vs. SNK, SVC Chaos, and many other great games. But with that said, on average, in January 2021, a Xbox was going for on average about $38. As of 2022, on average, it is going for around $50. So it's actually gone up about $12 over the last year. How do I see it moving forward? I think it's going to stay relatively steady. There could be a possibly small increase in price just because I see the 6th console generation right now is the new upcoming flourishing console. We're definitely already seeing that with software prices. Specifically on the Dreamcast has really been hit hard because of the hardcore fans. And you're also seeing it really on specific titles, also with, of course, the Gamecube is now really big time. You're also seeing it with specific games on the PS2, though it's more 50-50 game prices. And then you have the Xbox, which overall price range is still relatively cheap in comparison. Look at games like the Silent Hill series. Like Silent Hill 3 or Silent Hill 4 The Room. On PlayStation, you're looking at well over probably $100 on PS2. While you can get on Xbox for probably between, like, what, $30 to $40, you can get for less than half the price. Heck, a game like Obscure, which goes for over $200 on the PS2, you can get for probably about $50 to $60 on the original Xbox. So there's a real major price difference there. And like I said, the hardware prices are really decent. I mean, even though it's gone up, it's still around $50. It's still very affordable in my opinion. The hardware price is very reasonable, as well as the software lineup is superb. I mean, if you're a fine game fan, this is definitely a good console. If you're a 3D fine game fan, it's a great console to get. For the fact that there's several games that actually play in 720 pixel resolution, specifically Soul Calibur 2, and of course, exclusive character Spawn as well for the game. But that's just it for this edition. Sadly, this video ended up a little longer than I expected it to. My apologies. In the future, I'll try and make it about half this length. But with that said, I'll see y'all next time and stay safe. See you again. Same YouTube time, same YouTube channel.